Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Welcome to Nevada Newsmakers. On the broadcast today, the legendary Sig Rogich joins us. He's the president of Rogich Communications, and he's here for the whole show on an all-new Nevada Newsmakers.
Safety. We all think about it. You think about it when he buckles in, when you check your mirrors and put away your phone. RTC thinks about safety too. In fact, we create it. Center turn lanes mean fewer blind spots. Bike lanes keep cyclists and you safe. Roundabouts reduce injury collisions, and all these crosswalks are designed to keep families like yours safe. Safety is your priority, and it's ours too. Every day, in everything we do.
Retail's impact on Nevada's economy? Enormous. 8,600 businesses, large and small, employing 145,000 workers. And last fiscal year, retail paid tax on nearly $60 billion in sales. We're the Retail Association of Nevada. We support retail, we help it grow, and we mean business.
RANNV.org.
Pro Group Management is the place where companies can find workers' comp solutions that are designed to meet their specific business requirements. As regulations evolve, Pro Group takes a proactive approach to clear the path to make sure your business stays ahead of the curve. Knowing your workers' comp program is optimized, you can focus on other important matters related to your growing business. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
Safety is the #1 priority for the trucking industry. Over $7 billion a year is spent on technology like this electronic eye that will apply the brakes automatically. But the most important factor for safety is the truck driver. These hardworking men and women who safely move over 70% of our nation's freight and 94% of Nevada's. We thank you because trucks move America forward.
This is Nevada Newsmakers with host Sam Shad on No Holds Barred Political Forum. Now, from the Nevada Newsmakers broadcast headquarters, here is Sam Shad.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we're absolutely delighted to be talking with Sig Rogich. He's the president of Rogich Communications, a longtime advertising executive, helped run 2 campaigns for President Reagan, President Bush, the first one, was also involved in the second Bush campaign. Absolute pleasure to have you back on the program, Sig.
Well, it's always a pleasure to be with you too, Sam. Thank you.
So let's start out with just your initial thoughts on the election we've just been through and what's been happening since the election day.
Well, I'm not really surprised by the results of the election. I do think there are some problems with the election itself, mechanically speaking. I'm not sure if there's fraud involved, frankly. I do know that Pennsylvania, for example, has a long history of fraudulent elections, especially in the Philadelphia city area. And I just think this thing plays out a little bit through the process, but those who say he's impeding the process, are not reflecting on the fact that you've had previous elections that went into the month or two where they were decided because of discrepancies. Gore Bush is a good example of that, and later when Bush ran against Kerry, that took a while as well. So these things take a little bit, and I think at the end of the day we'll come to a good conclusion.
Were you surprised at the turnout? 77 million for Biden, 70 million or 72 million actually at this point for Donald Trump. Did either of those numbers surprise you?
Well, I guess everybody would be a little surprised. I did think you would have a record turnout. I think I predicted Republicans in Nevada would vote close to 90%, and that Democrats would vote at something like close to 75%. I don't know what those numbers turned out to be, but I'm not surprised. There was such a hype for this election cycle, and we started early, and we never let up. It seems like we were on an election mode, for the last 18 months.
Do you think that that the current President Trump is, both looking to see if the election results can be overturned, as we know them now, or is he really beginning a campaign for 2024?
Well, I think his campaign owes it to his supporters to identify any problems that may have an effect on the election. I'm not sure they're going to have an effect on the election. I do think there's a reasonable possibility that Pennsylvania would be flipped because I think that the state laws are pretty definitive. You know, you can't have one individual arbitrarily changing election laws, and especially if it's mandated legislatively, you know, that state law takes precedent, and they have to enact any changes to the legislative process. So you may see some of that, but I think all in all, I always thought it was Biden's to lose. I mean, Trump's his own worst enemy, as most people will tell you, that even though those who support him heavily, you know, I think if he would have kept his mouth shut a lot, he probably would have run away with this election. But that's neither here nor there now, and I think it needs to just play itself out. I have confidence in the system through the years. I know there's been problems with voting machines in the past. We had them in Nevada in the 60s and 70s, I know, and we made changes because of it. And so there was some controversy, you know, then. So I'm not too surprised to see it now.
Jill Derby was on the program. You and she served together on the Board of Regents years ago. And she was saying that she has grave concerns about national security issues with this, you know, time between, you know, a Trump administration and not handing over the keys, as it were, to a new Democratic group. Do you have the same kind of concerns?
No, it's nonsense. If you worked in the system, you know that there are systems and backup systems and then backups to backups. It goes on. So I'm not concerned about that at all. And you really have to be part of the Washington component to understand that we have a lot of fail-safe components relative to what's vital, you know, for the new president-elect to see.
It was interesting in a conversation I had with Michael Cadenassi, who is the chairman of the Washoe County Republican Party. And he was saying that in Washoe County at this point, that the leading group is Democrats, the second group is none of the above, and the third group are Republicans. And so it's the Republicans' need now to go after none of the above to win future elections. How does that jive with what you know?
Well, I thought during this election cycle, actually, that independents, I didn't think of none of the above, but I thought independents would have a significant number here in Nevada, and they do. And I think the party structure going forward really is a little transformational in the sense that the party's going to have to change the way it does business, just like the Democrats have changed the way they do business. I mean, the Democrats used to be the party of the working, you know, blue-collar worker, and it seems like that role has been picked up now by Republicans. If you look at the coal miners and the steel workers and so forth across the country, automobile workers and others, they you know, for the most part, voted Republican. So the parties, you know, it's not unusual to see things change, and I think you'll probably see a little more of it as we go along. But I think Republicans will do a significant outreach to Hispanics, Latinos, and I think that therein lies a good part of the future for the party. I think the two elements really line up well together, you know, in terms of work ethics, jobs, education, religion. Those are issues that are important to Latinos across the country, and I think that Republicans have an opportunity to pick up a lot of support there. It's going to be interesting to watch how the outreach works, and I think it has to be creative and it has to be sincere.
Do you think that there is an opportunity now to get immigration done? Mark Amadei was on the program just a week or so ago, and I asked him about things that could be done across the aisle at this point in time. And he gave all the reasons why immigration couldn't get done and said they were all nonsense, that you could really get a whole bunch of things done. You were certainly around at the time the last major immigration reform bill was passed in '86. Do you see an opportunity now, because it would be beneficial not just to the Democrats but to the Republicans as well?
You know, I hope so. I'm not sure they can reach across the aisle because they demagogue these issues so amazingly, during the election cycle. But if Joe Biden keeps to his promise of legalizing, I think, 11 to 13 million illegal immigrants, the impact on America is overwhelming. I mean, just imagine if we took 100,000 of those people and put them in Las Vegas, 100,000 out of 13 million, or whatever the number is going to be. Imagine what the impact would be to the city of Las Vegas alone. So I think they've got to work through it. I think people who come here and do things the right way should be rewarded for it. And frankly, Latinos that I talk to feel the same way. They don't want to see millions of illegals coming here and jeopardizing their own jobs and their own security.
Well, let's just examine that briefly. So you're talking about legalizing people who are already here, who are already potentially working within the system. So, how much of a change would there be necessarily in that makeup of where they lived and where they worked?
Well, that's not what I meant, really. What I meant was going forward for those who are trying to gain legal access to the United States. I think they have to go through a process. You can't just go to the border and hop a fence.
Right, of course.
And have a history of living your life poorly and then bringing it into this country. So to answer your first question, I do think there's a chance for some immigration reform. As a practical matter, they have to get there. The overburden on the medical systems, the educational systems, the housing systems in our country just can't turn a deaf, ear or a blind eye to the problems of not finding some methodologies that make sense. So I think that people on both sides of the aisle have to come to an understanding. They have to realize the impact it's going to have on this country going forward. And I think, you'll find a coalition that builds in an unusual way. Labor can't be happy about what they're seeing, organized labor, because it jeopardizes their own, standing in the work community. And so I think you'll find that people come realistically and fairly and reasonably to the table and talk about the problems and try to find solutions.
Well, it would be amazing to see that happen, because it's probably, in my experience, the most contentious issue. And it was a miracle that it even survived that 86 bill. Let me turn your attention to what Senator Reid has been talking about, and you headed up Republicans for Reid in his last election cycle. His advice to Joe Biden that if the Republicans don't come to the table in the Senate, that they should suspend the filibuster or get rid of it permanently. Mark Amadei was very much against that. He said it would just turn it into two houses instead of a House and a Senate.
I agree with that. I think it's a horrible idea. Harry Reid's, as much as I love him over the years, hasn't been too successful in some of the legislation that he introduced and spearheaded. You look back at what happened with the appointment of judges, and that came as an aftermath of what Harry did as a majority leader in suspending certain rules and regulations. So that's allowed Republicans now to probably appoint, more than 300 federal judges, and not to mention what's happened at the Supreme Court level and the changes in the way things are done. The filibuster is integral to the essence of the Senate, in my opinion, and I think that eliminating it does all the things that Amadei says and more. And I'm hopeful they don't get there, and I don't think they will get there right now, because Republicans should maintain control of the U.S. Senate.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back with much more with Sig Rogich after this timeout.
Tamarack Casino is giving away $100,000 through November 28th. You heard that right. Tamarack is giving away $100,000 guaranteed. Every Friday and Saturday, Tamarack will give away $5,000 nightly. And on October 30th and November 28th, Tamarack will be giving away $20,000 in all cash grand prizes guaranteed. Don't miss your chance to win big.
Ooh, your good times at Tamarack.
Your good times are at Tamarack.
The signs and symptoms of cataracts can start out small with subtle changes in your vision. So don't wait. Be proactive and take your vision into your own hands. If you're experiencing the onset of cataracts or just have questions, contact your eye care professional or call Eye Care Associates of Nevada today. Dr. Hiss has years of experience specializing in the surgical correction of eye disorders and has completed over 84,000 vision correcting procedures. At Eye Care Associates of Nevada, we'll change the way you look at the world.
Hey, Dad? Are you learning? This place is great. Huh? You gotta try this.
Wow, this stuff is great. People are gonna love it.
Yes. Yes, they will.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Sig Rogich. He's the president of Rogich Communications. We now have a president-elect, and who I presume you feel is going to eventually end up being the president, and two Democratic senators in the state of Nevada. What does this mean in terms of benefits, do you believe, for Nevada?
Well, I think it's about time Nevada really stood up to the federal government in a positive, reasonable way. We're like a stepchild. You think of the things Nevada does. First of all, the government owns more than or close to 80% of the whole state. What rational, reasonable reason should the government own that much of our state? And then when they let land go to be auctioned, we're supposed to get the benefit of the tax revenue that comes with development of those pieces of property. But what happened in southern Nevada, the BLM auctions caused the rising of home values and land values to such a degree that it was a bubble. And it was just poorly handled. So people came in, made extraordinarily big bids, eventually went bankrupt and gave them back, and that set the stage for just bad planning. I think in the future, we should get back more tax revenue of the taxes we send to the federal government. I don't know where we stand, but I know that I think we get less than 70% back, and that's very low compared to other states. But our two senators are Democrats. We have a Democrat governor. We have now a Democrat president. This should be a time that we get repaid for some of the things we do for the federal government. If you take Nellis Air Force Base and the airspace that goes with it, the Fallon Naval Station and the Hawthorne Munitions Depot, and you add that to Area 51 and the test site, those are just 5 good examples of an amazing amount of things that we do for the federal government. And I don't think we get repaid at all. I years ago had to fight with the federal government to get them to build and rebuild a school on the Nellis site in southern Nevada. It was dilapidated. It was loaded with asbestos. And I brought the governor down there with Sandoval at the time and urged him to use his influence to try to get something fixed. And it's just those kinds of things, I think, that finally have reached the apex of where Nevada should be in terms of asking for what's fair. And that means a better return on the tax revenues they provide to the federal government. We're not getting it now, and we need to get it.
And how would this come? Would this come in the form of a special bill? Because one of the reasons that we don't get more money from the federal government is that Nevada has not put up the maximum amount of matching funds to get additional monies from the federal government.
Well, listen, that's true, but what that means that you're not giving us any credit for all the other things we do, which theoretically are reaching those levels. When you give away real estate to the federal government to conduct every type of secret mission known to man and get nothing in return for it, then something has to give. I don't know how big that Area 51 site is or how big the test site is now, but I remember those early days as a boy growing up when we would detonate, the atomic bombs, and kids would stand up on the mountainside and watch them. And all those poor people in Utah in the South, that they called them Southerners, who died, because of the fallout. We've done our fair share for the federal government over the years. From you just name it, look around our state. It's one big federal deposit of programs that help the federal government, and we do not get repaid in kind.
There's currently, as you know, multiple lands bills that are working their way through the Congress, and yet the Clark County lands bill seems to be in a lot of trouble. Dina Titus certainly is not in favor of it, and nobody knows where this is going. Do you think that is going to be able to go through at this point, or is that lost for this session?
Sam, I don't know all the details on it, to be honest with you, to be able to answer that intelligently. I know that Dina is a very good voice in government. We may not agree philosophically on a lot of things, but I admire her spunk, I admire her ability and her intellect. And so I think if there's an issue there that she can capitalize on and to help the state, she will.
All right, let's take another break. More with Sig Rogich when we come back.
Dimitri Prine here for Design Outdoor. Come visit Design Outdoor's store and backyard to see our wide selection of fire pits, barbecues, and pizza ovens, natural stone water features and fountains, and frost-proof pottery. Our store and backyard are located at 11600 South Virginia, just north of DeMonte Ranch Parkway. Visit designoutdoor.com or call us at 851-9499.
One of the most psychologically damaging things parents can do to children in divorce is disparage one another, which is why I can't believe I even have to make this commercial. Half of your kids' genetics come from this person you're spewing hate about. Your children have the right to love you both, but more than that, they deserve to love themselves.
Marilyn York might be a men's rights divorce attorney, but this is for every selfish parent. Shut up!
Tamarack Casino is giving away $100,000 through November 28th. You heard that right. Tamarack is giving away $100,000 guaranteed. Every Friday and Saturday, Tamarack will give away $5,000 nightly. And on October 30th and November 28th, Tamarack will be giving away $20,000 in all cash grand prizes guaranteed. Don't miss your chance to win big.
Ooh, your good times at Tamarack.
Your good times are at Tamarack.
This is Nevada Newsmakers.
And back on Nevada Newsmakers, we continue our conversation with Sig Rogich. He's the president of Rogich Communications and served honorably in the Reagan administration, the Bush administration, Bush 1 and Bush 2 as well, in helping that campaign. You're also involved with Resorts World. Looks like they're going to be opening up next year. What are your thoughts on what's happening on the Las Vegas Strip and what Resorts World is looking at for next year because of COVID?
Well, I think Resorts is uniquely positioned, to be well received by the public. They have a brand new, beautiful facility, and we do work for them in terms of disclosure. And I'm really proud to say that they're building a fantastic facility, and I think it'll be received well by tourists. It'll be a must-see by everybody that comes to Las Vegas. I think that the Strip in total has issues. I think you could see some bankruptcies. I think we made fundamental mistakes as an industry years ago when we allowed casinos to own more than 4 or 5 at a time. When former governors, Democrats and Republicans, were around, Laxalt and O'Callaghan come to mind, they said no to Howard Hughes, who tried to buy the Stardust, because they thought it would be too big and bad for the industry itself, bad for labor and management. And so they said no, and they stopped him from buying it. Now we've got 3 companies that basically run the state. We've got Station Casinos. They've been bankrupt twice, I think. We've got Caesars. They've been bankrupt at least once. We've got MGM. They're always on the verge with all their debt load. And so they control our destiny. So I think we need to potentially examine how business is done in that regard. Having said that, Vegas has always found a way to reinvent itself, and I think it will here too. I think these days of gouging are going to be gone. That means hidden room rates and coupled with with other charges, you know, for things like parking, which was a horrible thing to do for the city from a PR standpoint. As an MGM focus that started that whole thing, and I think that they reluctantly pulled it, even though it meant a lot of revenue loss for them. But the town's going to change. You know, you're going to find consolidation of services, streamlining, and efficiencies will come into play here. I worry about a lot of the culinary workers who may not be rehired, and so maybe as much as a third of them, I heard, may not have their jobs back in the final analysis. And it's sad to me to think that we're at a stage here where that could occur. But I think those are the kinds of things you're going to see. I think entertainment's going to change. You can't pay superstars these big salaries if you can only fill a third and maybe a half of the showroom. You can't pencil it out. And it goes on from there, you know. Room charges. I think that the gouging that went on certain room rates is going to change. People are looking more and more for efficiencies and bargains, and I think competition is going to be significant.
And
Tourism
Sig,
is
unfortunately,
the number one industry in the world, Sam.
Sig, unfortunately,
you know,
we are out of time. We have so much more to talk about, which means that I need to contact you and have you back on the program very soon.
Okay.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much for doing
Me too.
this.
Thank you, Sam. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you, and we'll be right back.
Bye-bye.
A bird's eye captures its surroundings at different heights. At Brian Culpa Photography, we can make your imagination soar over buildings, parks, cityscapes, and beyond. Brian's images tell the story and get the job done. If you need a new perspective to tell your story, contact Brian today. Brian Culpa Photography. Experience the bird's eye view at brianculpaphotography.com.
Hi, my name's Marilyn Miner, and I'm sure you'd agree that Nevada's a very special place to live. I was born here, and my husband and I have raised our family here. I feel it's a privilege to live and work in the Truckee Meadows. I especially enjoy helping my clients reach their real estate goals. Sometimes the smallest details provide the greatest satisfaction. I'd be complimented to talk to you about your next move.
Call Marilyn Miner at Dixon Realty, 742-1280, or log on to marilynminer.com.
Safety. We all think about it. You think about it when he buckles in, when you check your mirrors and put away your phone. RTC thinks about safety too. In fact, we create it. Center turn lanes mean fewer blind spots. Bike lanes keep cyclists and you safe. Roundabouts reduce injury collisions, and all these crosswalks are designed to keep families like yours safe. Safety is your priority, and it's ours too. Every day, in everything we do.
Pro Group Management specializes in providing industries with the necessary components to satisfy and exceed workers' comp requirements. Every business has unique needs and specific regulations. Pro Group Management stays ahead of the curve, providing up-to-date services to keep your industry in top form. Discover how we simplify your tasks, improve efficiency, and reduce expense to keep you moving in a positive direction. Pro Group Management, workers' comp that works for you.
You can now watch Nevada Newsmakers on YouTube. Just go to YouTube and search for Nevada Newsmakers and become a subscriber. We'll see you on the next broadcast. Thanks for watching and listening.